how many programmers are here? Just so I know. Okay, great. So everybody can find somebody that can explain anything they don't understand. All right, so this is largely going to be about, yes?
You ready to go?
Go. Yeah. So this is, has its roots in what I teach at school. I teach a programming class that is really focused on design principles and on being systematic about how you attack problems. That's pictures of the school that I teach at and the book that I use for the programming class. I'm sure you all can tell which is which. The book, How to Design Programs, is really data focused. So we're looking at the structure of data and using that to derive the shape of programs. But we're also using it to teach design strategies, and top-down versus bottom-up design strategies are kind of, it's a duality that is there in programming and in a lot of other stuff, and that's what I'm interested in here. Top-down, we start with a problem, we figure out what are the givens, what are the goals, what do I have, what do I want, and then we can design the program in terms of helper functions that don't even exist yet. We just imagine them, make them up, and then we design the helper functions the same way. So it's a recursive sort of algorithm for doing it. And I give the students a little recipe that they can use. So we start with what's your input and output data, then just make a dummy function that returns the right kind of data but the wrong value. And say what it's for, make actual examples with specific inputs, fill in the body, and then run and test everything. And the students work through this. So for example, if you're trying to make Tetris, you'd first start by defining all the data pieces that you need for the game. Then you might have to specify all your event handlers and your main function. And then there's a second layer of helper functions you need, and then a third layer of helper functions from there, and so on until you've developed everything and you have a running game. Yay. Okay. Bottom up is more like, let's dump out all of the toys and see what we have and start putting things together in small increments. And then eventually we'll get to a point where we have some useful stuff, and then the useful stuff aggregates and aggregates and aggregates, and we get to actual functionality that we care about. Any of you that have used Unix know about this, because in Unix you have all those stupid little two-letter commands. If you're building stuff with the Tinker Toys, you know, you can identify smaller units and say, oh, well, I'll build the left half of the bridge, and then I'll build the right half the same way, and then I'll figure out how to stick them together. So it's kind of, you tend to hear the words organic and emergent in discussions of bottom-up work, just like an ant farm. The ants don't have individual notions of what the colony should look like. It just sort of arises out of their behavior. And it's appealing. It's a good way to learn, right? It's basically play. It's how we start to understand stuff and how we start to understand problems. So I'm going to say one of the axioms I work from in my teaching is that if it's going to be a core item in my class, a core idea, then it has to serve every student. And that means that I have to choose and be very honest with myself about what the core issues are and what they're not. And we're bad about that a lot of the time, especially in math curriculum, where we love all our little esoterica and they're just not important. So let me give you some examples of situations where I've seen one or both of these processes in action. A few years back, discovered Meteor when it came out. Some of the students at school brought it to my attention. And I thought, well, I work in Racket. I'd love to have an automatic accounts UI like the Meteor people, but there aren't libraries for cookies and user database and so on. So I thought, all right, I don't get the overall organization, but I know I'm going to need cookies, and the Racket cookies library is crappy, so I wound up writing a Racket cookies library from scratch. And this to me is like bottom-up thinking. It's like, okay, I don't know how the whole is going to be, but I know this part's necessary, so let me build it. Consequently, well, after that, I found I also had to implement Racket JWT, and at that point I decided, okay, I'm shaving a yak here, and I don't want to do that because it's somebody else's yak. And even though I didn't finish the project, at least we wound up with a library that everybody could use that was a small part of it. And you see this sort of thing happen in architecture, you know, top-down projects, big things like the Great Wall of China or the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. The architect has to figure out how it's going to work, and then it takes hundreds or thousands of years to build it. This is some of my notes from music. This is sort of a bottom-up approach because I'm looking at, this is a transcription of the melody and some of the words for a song and some of the harmonies. I do that when I start to arrange a song just to get a sense of what's the material I have to work with. And I also do form analysis, and so I label the sections that repeat over and over in the song. And that helps me piece things together on a larger level. I also use this in writing songs. So for example, I have a template in one of my programs where I just have little areas that I can drag things into for all the A sections and B sections. And as I play with lyrics, I might drag them to different places in it. And this is a top-down structure that helps me. Lately, I've also been thinking about the way that life just seems to be irreducibly bottom-up. You know, we have our experiences every day. And we're trying to synthesize a coherent picture of the world from it. And I thought, well, you know, if I look at it top down, maybe I should actually spend some time setting out my goals for life. So I'll leave you all with that question. What do you design and how?
Wow.
Yes, Preston.
Can I just have you repeat the phrase, it seems like you said life is irreducibly bottom up?
Yeah.
And I just love that, and I wish it fit on a bumper sticker.
Yeah, there's got to be a more concise way to say that.
That's
life
amazing.
is irreducibly bottom up.
I'm going to steal that, and I'm not going to quote you.
Okay, that's fine.
I can poison the world by saying top down is where you make yourself OKRs.
Where you make yourself what?
Quarterly goals.
Oh,
Never mind. I hate it.
Alright. Yes. No.
How are you challenged to try to deliver on a lot of this when you're faced with like 26 graders? Especially the previous slide.
When you say, oh, okay, so can we go back one?
How does this come up and what do you
this stuff?
Yeah.
I don't know, because honestly I wrote these this summer. I've been doing a lot of reflecting on this. I told Jamie earlier tonight, my wife died a couple months ago. And so it's the sort of thing that makes you think about this shit, right? And I was thinking about this honestly because in all of our interactions every day, it's like we had this experience of we're in the moment. And you know, being in the moment is great. But you have to actually step back at some point and say, all right, what's the big picture? What is the goal that I'm aiming for here? And I don't know that I'm going to succeed in it, but you know, notice I picked goals that don't depend on anybody else really, for the most part. These are things that I can be in control over. You had a question?
Do you feel like you were bottoms up before? Captain?
I feel like that's kind of our default way of operating, right? As people, it's like things happen in front of us, and occasionally we notice patterns, and that's just what we do. It's our MO. We see patterns. We associate them with other things we've seen. It's just what we do, and so it's good. Bottom up is good as a way for making sense out of the world or out of some situation you haven't seen. And once you've done enough of that, then maybe you've seen enough things and you've got the experience where you could take some big system and figure out how it's got to be structured. That's one of the things that I always slightly envied my wife in her work. She was an information architect, which for those of you that don't know what that role is, it's somebody who looks at all of the information that we want to get onto a website and figures out how do we organize all that stuff and index it so that everybody who wants to come to our site can find the stuff they're after. And it's the kind of thing that usually a library science background is helpful for. I don't even remember how I got onto that tangent now. Yeah.
When you say design thinking, Jordan, you're not thinking about the Stanford.
No. I'm thinking specifically about top-down versus bottom-up design in programming and analogous situations that I see elsewhere. Getting all metaphorical.
Sorry. Any more questions? Evan?
One thing that seems the bottom-up design concept seems like it works best when you have a pattern to follow. Like, you know, you think about putting the Tinker Toys together and you're looking for the bridge, you're looking for the arch, you're looking for the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're designing from the top down, you might be trying to build something with like some grand vision that's totally new.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like those are separate domains, or are they both the same, different aspects of the same thing? Like,
I'm having a reaction to separate domains that suggests to me, no, it doesn't seem like two separate domains to me. I'm not sure that I can get a useful answer to your question out of that, though.
I guess what I'm asking is, do you feel like bottom up is limited by following patterns that the designer has seen before?
They're both kind of limited by patterns the designer has seen before, right? I mean, if you haven't seen any operating systems, you're probably not going to do a great job designing an operating system from scratch, just because of the complexity, and you don't know how things are going to interact ahead of time. I can tell you that in the context of the programming classes, the bottom-up work that the students see is all in the REPL that they work with, which, for those of you who don't know, that's an interactive programming environment. Like if you've worked with Python, you type Python and it gives you a prompt, and then you can type expressions or commands to evaluate. Okay, so quick feedback. And the students in my classes work in an interaction window like that, where they can write expressions that build up parts of what they want, and that's kind of like looking at the parts of the Tinker Toys kit, where you see, okay, if I write this, then I get a picture of, a cat or whatever, and then if I want to have a group of 13 cats sitting on a log, then I need the picture of the log and I can place them somehow. And the kids find that out experimentally by playing around. It's just, bottom up is better for giving you quick feedback on stuff, because the quantity of stuff you're working at a time usually is small. With the top down, it's like how that Sagrada Familia church has been, it's been under construction for over 100 years now. It's still not done. Last I was there, it still had scaffolding all around it. And so it's not as usable as a cathedral as an actual complete cathedral would be. And top down has that kind of drawback where you can wind up having invested a lot of money and a lot of time in something, and then you don't have a finished working product that's really great because of how front-loaded everything is.
I'd love to hear more about the take on projects of being in a car. It's easier.
I was thinking, I chose that wording deliberately. I had a different wording previously that enumerated several kinds of things rather than projects. And I thought, no, it's easier just to say projects, because I'm thinking about things like songwriting and making learning materials for my students, and possibly writing other kinds of stuff.
What's a hard
It's not
trick?
like
Yeah.
activist burnout or something.
So, no, wait, I must have misheard that. Say again?
It wasn't about trying to figure out how to deal with activist burnout or things
No.
like that. Okay.
No,
That's
no,
not
no.
really
No, I mean, things like, learning materials that make it easier to understand complicated ideas.
Oh, so these are truths that are hard, not necessarily
What do you say?
hard truths.
Yeah,
Well,
what's it called?
I actually, there is an intentional ambiguity in there.
It's
Right.
very elegant.
Because with songwriting, often you want a little ambiguity. With any kind of writing, it can be good to have a little ambiguity, because that's what's going to make people think, oh, well, it could be this, could be that. Although those both kind of make sense. I don't know. I like art better that makes me wonder that way. So,
Well, you've succeeded there.
well, good.
This,
Yeah, I spent time on the wording of these things.
this slide is captivating.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
It's really vulnerable to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you. You're the second person who has made that particular comment to me, and I find that fascinating. Because to me, of the things that I have shared with people, this does not feel like one of as great vulnerability to me, interestingly. But I can see what would make you say that, because, yeah, this is stuff that we don't talk about, right?
Well, if you list these as your life goals, then we're stuck here thinking, what's the amazing life that led to these goals, Like, it seems like it speaks to both pain and joy.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have, yeah.
You've had both.
It's one of the interesting things to be wrestling with when you're in the situation that I'm in, where you have a pretty complete past life to reflect on, and you have a totally unknown future life, hopefully, to enjoy. I'm looking at this as, okay, I'm in a spot where I need to find some new angles on my search for meaning in life, and that's what this is all about. This part of it.
Have you read Max Ehrman's Desiderata?
I have not.
It's like that with a lot more words, like 7 times that many words.
Oh, so this is better then, huh?
Yes.
It just makes some hard truths easier for us.
Yeah.
Then I've done my job.
This is I imagine this was a task requiring a lot of mental and spiritual and emotional effort. Any things that guided you in this? Any resources? Anything? Any books that prompted this particular project? Because this seems like something you don't just sit down on a Sunday afternoon and do.
No. This was over the course of several days and then edited again a week later and then edited again later and so on. I was not cribbing from any books as I was doing this. There's obviously a lot that I've read over the years. I took a lot in general from the Tao Te Ching, and there were some things in that that were really helpful for getting through the last year also. Yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. There are definitely other things I've read.
Appreciate it.
Any further questions? Let's thank Jordan.
Thank you.